Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remus.
Hey, what is going on, everyone? A happy Tuesday to you all, and welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson with you. Little things different today. Long time. First of all, Remus took a day off. I talked about this yesterday. Listen, the guy's been working his ass off for a long time. It's been a long time since he's had a day off. There he is. He's just, I don't know, out at the beach, getting a little bit of sun. It is strange. I think if we wanted to do a why not question of the day right out of the gate in the chat, if you were going to take one day off in a week, what day would you take? I would say Monday or Friday would be at the top of that list. Tuesday is probably last, but Remus works in strange ways. So shout out to Reem for a well-earned day off. Got to welcome in our pal Alex Allard, who's back helping us to run the program today. Great to have Alex back on. And we're going to have a packed show, add in a couple extra guests, and a very special treat for all of you right off the bat. Going to get going with our pal Rennie himself, Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. We'll also have Mike McIntyre with his usual visit. I've got a great draft segment coming up as well with Tony Ferrari from the Hockey News in advance of the trip down to Nashville coming up in 2 weeks for the draft. And then at 2:30, we're not done talking about Nick Taylor's win at the RBC Canadian Open. And of course, it's a major week, US Open down in LA. And the Z-Man, who had that incredible call on the PGA Tour radio broadcast, we'll play that for you. Mark Zecchino is going to join us from LA, get his thoughts on just a historic day for Canadian golf on Sunday, and get his thoughts on who might be raising that trophy at the end of another major championship coming up this week. So we've got a packed show. Shout out to everyone that's with us right off the hop here on YouTube. Hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that thumbs up. And a big, big thanks to the podcast listeners who loyally make Winnipeg Sports Talk a part of their routine each and every day. Just before we bring in Ren, got to thank the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Princess Auto, Consolidated Supply, Royal Sports, BP, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, our friends at Breezy Bend Golf and Country Club, Little Brown Jug, Nick and Nicky DQ Group, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health Fresh Market, Assiniboia Downs, the Gold Eyes, who are on the road for the next week, Modern Man Barbershop, Aquatech, Manitoba Battery, and Canadian Club. And, of course, a big thanks to our friends at CoolBet. Dustin Nielsen, myself, and Pat Gregoire just dropped our U.S. Open preview with our picks for that. So get that over at the Lock Shop Bets YouTube channel or on our Twitter feed. And, of course, a huge thanks to CoolBet, because in 2 weeks from now, myself, Michael Remus, and our next guest will be all over everything happening with the Winnipeg Jets in Nashville. Winnipeg Sports Talk in Nashville at the NHL Draft presented by CoolBet begins on June 26th. Cannot wait for it. And tell you what, a lot of the topics we're going to get to with Rennie right away could very well continue to be big topics heading into that Monday. Let's welcome him in. The dashing host of KNR and your favorite Sportsnet reporter, the one and only Sean Reynolds. Ren, what is going on, man? It's great to have you on the program.
It's great to be here. It gives me a good excuse from all the construction work that I've taken on in my backyard. So I'd rather talk hockey than swing a hammer, and here I am.
Hey, we're going to talk hockey, but just quickly, I mean, you know, everyone coast to coast, even if you weren't a golf fan, saw Nick Taylor's incredible putt on Sunday and, you know, what that meant for Canadian golf and Canadian sport. We had another huge Canadian moment last night as Jamal Murray of Brampton, or Kitchener, I believe, leads the Denver Nuggets, along with Nikola Jokic, to their first ever NBA championship. And, you know, Denver, a small team that had never won before, a smaller market as it pertains to the NBA. We've seen the NBA explode. There was a number of players that were sort of supposed to be the one. Jamal Murray has sort of turned out to be the one. And, you know, that's a real significant, how about that for back-to-back days? A Canadian winning the Canadian Open and then a Canadian helping lead his team to an NBA championship.
Yeah, I love everything about that team. The Jamal Murray angle of it is probably the thing that I love the most. But I mean, you're talking about this player who's always been this phenomenal player, but when the playoffs come around, you've got to elevate him and what he's capable of doing in the playoffs into, the conversation of some of the best in the game right now. I mean, he caught my eye a number of years ago, and that was an exciting team. I'm always kind of a root for the underdog kind of guy, so I like that. I'm definitely, a couple of years ago when the Greek Freak and the Milwaukee Bucks won it, and he'd said, the whole idea about the super team and, anyone can do that. That's easy. I've always agreed with that. I've hated that about basketball, how, players just look around and say, I can't win a championship, so we're going to take the three best players from three different teams, cram them on one team, and there you go. I just absolutely despise that element of basketball that really has characterized a lot of basketball since the 2000s started. So when you get a small market team with a lot of homegrown talent, players that they went out and found themselves, a little bit of underdog guys. No one was saying when Jamal Murray came into the league, he was going to be leading teams to a championship, or Jokic. I just really love everything about that. I do remember a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to cover a little bit of the Toronto Raptors in 2019 when they won. And the only spot that we could watch the game from was a box that was shared by TSN and Sportsnet. And there was a bunch of NBA guys in that room for whatever reason. Jamal Murray was one of them in there. Such a classy guy, just the way that he conducts himself out and about with people. If there's people who are deserving in their play and in their character of winning a championship, he's one of them. Great story, great Canadian.
Yeah, and you got to feel for the market. I mean, that's 47 long years.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't get to 47 long years for a certain team here to finally win a championship. But there's a lot that needs to click and come together. But that was just a hell of a team, great performance, and a big, big day for Canadian hoops. Speaking of hoops, by the way, just before we get to the pucks, shout out to everyone that showed up last night at Canada Life Center. Another awesome crowd for the Sea Bears. They had their Filipino Heritage Night. It wasn't quite as big as the opener because I think they opened up extra seats, but the ticket allotment they sold, I believe it was around 5,400, which again, for the second consecutive game, smashes the previous attendance record for the CEBL. People are coming out. The game didn't go quite as well. Sea Bears had been awesome on the road. They came in at 4-1. They got whooped pretty good by Edmonton yesterday. It wasn't really close, but if you haven't been to a game, certainly suggest you check it out. 4-2 on the season. They got another game coming up on Thursday, and even in the loss, it was a really, really fun atmosphere and great to see everyone out there. All right, Rennie, let's get to what everyone is talking about right now. The Winnipeg Jets. It's funny. You go to Sportsnet or Daily Faceoff or TSN, really anywhere, and you get a trade bait, trade target, trade list board, whatever everyone wants to call it. The one common denominator is that look way up at the top, and it's a whole bunch of Winnipeg Jets. We'll maybe get to Dubois and Scheifele in a moment. But what did you have any element of surprise when you heard the reports on the weekend that, to quote, I believe it was The Athletic, that as far as Connor Hellebuyck and his next contract, that ship has sailed and it will be with another team. Did that at all surprise you, or considering what we heard from Hellebuyck at the end of the season in his final address to the media, were you sort of feeling that that was going to be the case as we get closer to the end of the month in June in Nashville?
Not a bit surprised. I've been saying, I think since pretty close to the beginning of the year last year on Kenny and Rennie, that the Jets were poised to have one of the biggest garage sales in NHL history, off-season garage sales, and that's exactly where we're headed. Connor Hellebuyck isn't a surprise to me because Connor Hellebuyck, it was going to take a number of those players to re-sign, to stay, a legitimate threat for Connor Hellebuyck Hellebuck to stick around. And to be honest, I mean, let's just say, the Jets had somehow managed to pull off re-signing Mark Scheifele, re-signing Pierre-Luc Dubois. If you're Connor Hellebuck, are you looking at this team based on what they've done over the last number of years with those players and saying, we're on the verge of a cup? I know he said it a couple of years ago after they got swept 4 straight to the Montreal Canadiens. I've made it vocal. I thought that whole thing that he said about them being on the verge of being a dynasty was one of the most ridiculous things
you've got to believe
have
in yourself,
ever heard.
Sean. You have to believe in yourself.
The time to proclaim you are on the verge of being a dynasty is not after you've just been swept 4 straight. I will stand by that forever. Have belief in yourself. Just don't do that. Don't do that. But I mean, even if the Jets were to bring everybody back, there would be no reason for Connor Hellebuck to believe that if he signed an 8-year extension, that this team would be on the verge of doing something special. Connor Hellebuck has made it entirely clear. The last thing every time I talk to him, I did it while we were in the playoffs. I want to know what he needed to prove in the playoffs at this stage. He says nothing. All I need is the cup, right? So he's all in on that. To me, it looked like if you are being, honest, taking an honest look, there's probably better places to go for that than the Winnipeg Jets. So, I mean, I think that he kind of left his options open. He didn't want to close the door on this 2 years ago, but I would think that Connor Hellebuck in his mind has been, very strongly looking at the idea of leaving Winnipeg for the last couple of years. So all of these things that are happening right now, I think are just confirmation of the stuff that we've already known and we've known for a long time. Pierre-Luc Dubois Connor Hellebuck wants to go to a place where he feels he has a better shot. And I think when it comes to Mark Scheifele, with all those players leaving, he's ready to, see what else is out there. But B, the one thing I've always thought about Mark Scheifele is because he signed such a sweetheart deal for the Winnipeg Jets, I think he's in the position where he feels he has to make his money on the next deal. I think the combination of that and trying to see what else is out there means those 3 players are gone.
Yeah. And that is what makes the Jets so fascinating right now. And Kevin Cheveldayoff's maybe, I mean, some would say unenviable position, but I would imagine there's probably a lot of general managers that would look at this as a real opportunity to completely reshape a team. And I think we'd all agree that that is necessary and maybe overdue.
Yes.
I'll say this about Dubois. I mean, listen, we all know the history. They traded Laine to get him. I mean, it was a huge, huge package. Number 2 pick and Roslovic for a guy that's number 3 pick. I mean, the first choice would be this guy working out here, wanting to be here, staying here, and signing long term. I mean, obviously that was their plan. There's no guarantees on that, and it's gone the other way. And now you've got a very talented young player approaching 25 years old that will have value in and around the league. Hellebuck has been the franchise. He's been the backbone. Would they like to sign him? Absolutely. If that's not happening, you're sort of being forced into moves with those 2 players. The Scheifele and Wheeler situations to me are very different. I mean, if all those players are gone, the first 2 that I mentioned are because of where they're coming from. I think the other 2 with Wheeler and particularly Scheifele, because of the value of his contract, maybe there's an argument to be made you could have done it earlier and got more return. But the bottom line is that is more about moving out and creating a space for new players, for new voices, and really, Sean, establishing a new identity going forward for this Winnipeg Jets hockey club. That might take a month, it might take a year, it might take more, but the bottom line is it'll be more about some younger players or players that have been here for a while that have been sort of secondary in nature when it comes to leadership, but also opening up opportunity for other players to have their voices heard and maybe be a little bit more impactful when it comes to building that team together and a new atmosphere around this club.
I think you make an interesting comment when you talk about how long it would take to establish that new culture, because I mean, I think that was job number 1 for Rick Bowness this year, was to come in and try and create an entirely different culture. And boy, oh boy, he took some big swings to do it. And in the end, and I don't want to say this lightly, because I don't think it didn't work because of anything that he didn't do. But in the end, he failed at that. Like, this was a team that by the end, like I said, they essentially, after Blake Wheeler had been stripped of his captaincy, by the end of the season, they pledged fealty to him. In that end of year media avail, he didn't need the A to be or the C to be our captain. That didn't change anything. And I mean, it was the very players that you were waiting to step up and take control of this team, the likes of the Adam Lowry, who I think did it on the ice and had a huge impact as a leader on this team down the stretch. I think he's the guy that picked the Jets up, dusted them off, and got them over the playoff line. I think Josh Morrissey did a phenomenal job of carrying that for the bulk of the season before I think he got a little bit tired towards the end of the season. But like in everything that they did, it looked like those players were stepping up and doing that. And then in the end, basically, pledging themselves to the previous captain who they were trying to get out of the way so that those guys could grow, absolutely blew me away. And it tells me that, this team wasn't ready. The players themselves were not ready to move on from the leadership or the culture that had been established for a long time, which is why, to your point, the moves for PLD and Connor Hellebuyck are far different than the moves that you would think of for Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, because if this team is not going to move on from the culture that looks to be getting them nowhere, if they refuse to do so with those players in the room and they're going to continue following that same old culture, it is incumbent upon the general manager and the organization to remove the, torch bearers for the culture that they feel they need to change. And so in this case, I think that this has to be done. If you're talking about long overdue moves, I think them addressing the culture was ridiculously overdue. I can't believe it took them this long to get to this point. But it's something it looks like needs to be done. I mean, I could only imagine this, Huss, if they moved Pierre-Luc Dubois, if they moved Connor Hellebuyck, even if they moved Mark Scheifele and brought Blake Wheeler back into that room next year, it just seems to me that all those moves would do something along the lines of getting back some resources. But if this team doesn't address its culture, I don't know what else. I don't know what other signs could be out there that you need to do this.
You know what it's like, Rennie? We've all had or been in situations where we've been romantically involved with a partner. And maybe you're not married, but you're living together. And you know what? You have some great years, and then things sort of fizzle out and you break up. But you're still living in the same house. You can say all the right things. You can go about your business, but it is pretty much impossible to really move on with your lives if you're still living in the same house. The Jets and Blake Wheeler and Rick Bowness are still living in the same house. And I think that, moving on would be best for all parties involved.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, I love that analogy. I just kind of imagine, the kids sitting there while mom and dad pass the milk back and forth, and then dad goes down and watches
fine.
his TV downstairs. Yeah, everything's fine. We just we don't talk anymore. But I mean, that's the interesting part about it, is the players just seem like I still am blown away by it. And maybe we shouldn't be, because behind the scenes, hey, there was something that stood out to me that was really interesting when we went down to cover the New York Rangers earlier on this year. Jacob Trouba had talked to us about, when Blake Wheeler was stripped of the captaincy, he gave a call to Blake Wheeler and wanted to tell Blake Wheeler, hey, I want you to know how instrumental you were in developing me as a captain, as he is now the captain of the New York Rangers, a very successful team. So, I mean, when you hear it from the players, and you've heard this time and time again, the players don't seem to want to stray from him. And there's leadership qualities that they see there that a lot of the players, I won't say all the players, but a lot of the players and a lot of the key players really gravitate towards and don't want to move on from. The thing that I always find strange in this situation is aren't those players curious about what's going on and why things aren't working. I mean, they to a man all come and say we've underachieved and we're better than we showed, and we feel disrespected by the league that they don't think that we're better, and then they don't do better, right? Like, this is a team that, you know, before this season had progressively got worse every season since 2018. I just wonder at some point, if you're a player in that dressing room, and whether you love Blake Wheeler or not, whether you think you've got a good culture, when that culture consistently means that you don't get anywhere, I just wonder where the curiosity of the players in this room is, and why they aren't thinking, what are we doing wrong? And maybe what do we need to change in order to get a different result? Because it seems like change is a bad word in the Winnipeg Jets dressing room. And, you know, basically what we've seen from Kevin Cheveldayoff is that he feels the same way in the lack of moves that he's made over the years.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, we all know, and we won't get into it, Winnipeg is a unique market. I mean, they need to sign their guys and get the most out of them and all that, for sure. But this team peaked in 2018. They had a disastrous second half of the 2019 season where there were some really concerning things around the hockey club on the ice, and I would say off the ice.
Yeah.
And no better
Yes.
example of that was in those year-end meetings at the end of the year.
Yep.
So, listen, they gave it their best shot. They believed in the team that they built, and you know, and I think they did a lot of things to give management reason to believe that, you know, they were capable of some special things. This is now 2023, and we saw the way this season ended. I mean, we don't really need to relitigate it. I mean, God knows we've talked about it enough, Sean. You know, we saw what this team did and didn't do with their backs against the wall against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, were they good enough to be a playoff team? Absolutely. Is there a lot of talent in the club? Yeah. But does anyone think that coming back again with the majority of this group together, as is, with the same drivers, is going, are we going in the right direction or the wrong direction? I think you could look at the last few years and know that, you know, it is time to mix up. And I'll say this about Wheeler. Listen, I know what was said, and like, I hated what he had to say about what Bonus's comments were, and the guys really backed up. I didn't think that was great for any of the parties involved, but I got a lot of respect with the way he handled losing the C this year. He did what he always does, and that's played hard when he's on the ice. And when we look back at Blake's body of work with the Winnipeg Jets, he will be and should always be remembered as a great member of this team that did a ton for the hockey club, ton for the community. All that being said, it is blatantly obvious that, you know, the time has come to, you know, to move forward, and maybe a little bit overdue. So we'll see what happens with Blake and how they handle that. He is a very different situation because of his age, because of his contract, the 1 year remaining, and whether that's a buyout, whether that's a trade, whether that's including him in with another piece that's going out, coming back, we'll find out. But it's the three other players, Sean, that you know, that Winnipeggers and Jets fans expect to see significant assets coming back for: Connor Hellebuyck, Dubois, and Mark Scheifele. How would you categorize the asks? I mean, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff right now, is there a priority amongst those three to get done first? And which of those do you believe probably can bring back the you know, the best looking package when it comes to reshaping what this Winnipeg Jets team looks like, not just, you know, in October of 2023, but really for the next 3-4 years and beyond?
So for me, it starts with Connor Hellebuyck, and it starts with Connor Hellebuyck because I think that you can just bring back an absolute boatload. I think that's the kind of trade that you can look back and think like, wow, remember that time the Jets traded Connor Hellebuyck? It was a sign and trade. He went on to a different team, and then we just absolutely built an organization's foundation for years and years and years to come. I think that's the first one that you need to get out of the way, because I think it's also going to determine, and this is the one that I always find is so strange. I still don't get the idea of the Winnipeg Jets saying it's a retool. We're not rebuilding. I mean, if you get thrown a whole bunch of assets by a team that is in win now mode, right? Because Connor Hellebuyck wants to win now. So you need to trade him to a win now team. So a win now team does not want to subtract a whole bunch of assets and send them out the door to get Connor Hellebuyck back and not be any better because they sent so much out the door to get him. It makes the most sense that if Connor Hellebuyck wants to win now, and that's where he'll go, and that's where he may sign and trade and thus give you the most value back, maybe what you get back is a futures package that is just absolutely gorgeous looking and really sets this team up for a long time and gives them team control over a whole bunch of players, which is what the Jets love more than anything. If you determine from that trade what your strategy is going to be going forward, did you pull off a retool? I still don't think it's possible. But if you pull off a great part of a rebuild, well, then now that points your ship in a certain direction. And I think it's the biggest asset return that you're going to get. And then once you have those assets in hand, now you can play a little bit. Now there's not as much pressure on you when you're going to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois, because if you end up losing that trade a little bit, but you really feel that you won on the Hellebuyck trade, you can say, you win some, you lose some. This is the stock market. Some stocks go like this. Some stocks go like this. Some stocks dip a little bit like this. It's the overall portfolio that matters. So if you can knock it out of the park with Hellebuyck, which I think you should be able to do, it sets you up so there's not as much pressure on the PLD deal. And then after that, I think the Scheifele one could get really interesting. I think after you take care of those two, Mark Scheifele comes in. He's got a great price for the next year. If you can do a sign and trade with him to the right team that feels it has a strong culture that will bring Mark Scheifele in and get him pointed in the right direction, because I still do believe the culture that has affected the Winnipeg Jets, there's probably not a player that has been affected by that culture more than Mark Scheifele, because I think he's a guy that if you point him in a certain direction, he's going to go in that direction. And I think the culture may have taken him off a little bit when it comes to, the full-on effort that he gives, the full-on defensive
I'll argue
effort.
that he was one of the biggest part of creating that culture.
Maybe, but if you get him to a place where someone is able to supersede him and get him on board with a new culture, I think Mark Scheifele could be the found money kind of trade that a lot of teams are looking for, in the idea that until last year, he was had one of the longest streaks of point per game seasons. He had 40 goals this last offseason. If you just take a look at his stats, it's the kind of things that other teams salivate over. So if you feel you can get him in the right situation and really get him pointed in the right direction, he's a guy who could be the winning trade for another team in the offseason. And I think you can conduct yourself like that if he's the last to go out the door and you've done well in the other situations. I think that he is a guy, especially if they're looking towards a futures thing again, he's a guy who could tip an offense over the top. And again, if you're doing that with a team that wants to win now, and you're probably getting futures back. I think this whole idea of retooling and ignoring the possibility of a rebuild is crazy, because I think the Jets have everything.
What do you define as a
favor.
rebuild? Like trying to suck and like being like a bottom 5 team in the league?
No, not at all. And I hate that idea of a rebuild, because
I think that's what a lot of people assume. And when the Jets are saying, hey, we're not rebuilding, like they're not going to tank. And I think they have too much talent on that team to be in that situation. But I'm with you. I mean, rebuilding to me is not bottoming out. It is making significant roster moves, changing over. And it might be a 1 step back for 2 steps forward in the future. But it's not like going back to ground zero and essentially blowing out 80% of the team.
I think the Winnipeg Jets are in the perfect position to rebuild, probably miss the playoffs next year, maybe the year after that, but really set themselves up for the next 2 years to be a young, exciting team. I always say this. How exciting was 2017 for the Winnipeg Jets when Patrick Laine was doing what he was doing and Kyle Connor was turning? He finally saw that he could turn into. That was fun. That was a fun year of watching hockey. I think the next 2 years for the Winnipeg Jets could be that. And maybe they don't make the playoffs, and I don't have to pay the bills the way that True North does. So you know what? It's easy for me to say this. Mark Chipman's the guy at the end of the year who has to get by without that playoff revenue. But I think they are perfectly situated to have the kind of rebuild that is like maybe like the New York Rangers a couple years ago, where they went down for a couple of years, turned things around. The St. Louis Blues, who, if you remember, the first time the Jets got Paul Stastny, it was because they sold at the trade deadline. And then a couple of years later, they're hoisting the cup. That's the kind of rebuild I think the Jets are positioned to pull off. I think the Jets at all costs should be avoiding the bottoming out rebuild like we saw for years from the Edmonton Oilers and years from the Buffalo Sabres, because I think once you fall that low, it's really, really hard to get out of that. But the Jets, I think, are a good enough team, have enough depth, have enough scoring, have enough, defensive elements that if you were to go and find, the Nemesnikovs of the world to round out your roster so that you've got competitive players who push in the right direction and go get a bunch of assets, I think the Winnipeg Jets are positioned to be the next New York Rangers team, the next St. Louis Blues team who turn things over and do it right quick while still maintaining exciting players like Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers and Josh Morrissey for this fan base to be engaged in, plus a bunch of young new guys, the next step of Perfetti. We got McGroarty, all these different kind of guys coming, but all the things that they could add in. I think the Jets are perfectly positioned to do that. I don't know why they are so afraid to do it. You and I have had our theories on this, that it's maybe a message to the players or either a message to the fans. But if the Jets aren't truly behind the scenes looking at the possibility of a rebuild where they load up on a whole bunch of players that are just ready to enter the NHL and kick some ass and take names, they're not doing their job properly.
Hey, before we go, and I don't disagree with your theory that the Hellebuck is the biggest deal of those three. The one thing I'll say, I mean, if they get it, Cheveldayoff's going to be judged by all of these deals. But do you not think that because of the backstory of how Dubois got here, the fact that this has been a saga over the course of the last couple seasons, but most importantly, that he will always be tied to trading Patrik Laine, that the pressure on Cheveldayoff to max out value on PLD, even just from a PR standpoint, is greater than either of the other two players we're talking about?
Yes and no. So yes, because if you're a fan, you're going to feel that way for a long time, as they should. I've said it on this show before. I think the Jets mismanaged the Patrik Laine situation. I think the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation that they are currently in right now is they are reaping, the fruits of the seeds that they sowed a number of years ago. I've always said this before, the best bosses, the best leaders are the ones that can say, I messed that one up. What's the best way to get out of this, right? Instead of being those leaders that are like, no, that wasn't a mess up, and trying to convince you constantly. And then in the meantime, you just keep heading in the wrong direction. Listen, I'm going to say it right now. When it comes to moving Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Jets are never going to get a good enough return to justify moving Patrik Laine. They lost on that, and they lost on it when they turned that young player away from this city and from that organization. That loss happened years ago. If you keep trying to turn that loss into a win, and then okay, well, we didn't get what we wanted this summer. Now let's push it and see if we can't move him at the trade deadline. And then, we couldn't move him at the trade deadline for what we wanted. So let's move him and try and give someone negotiating rights before July 1st the following year. I mean, just keep pushing it back and back and back. I just think that I know the end to this movie. I know how this plot wraps up. Kevin Cheveldayoff takes it on the chin for what happened with Patrik Laine, because he brought in a player that didn't want to be here either and just extended that problem, gave himself one more year to deal with it. Hey, I've heard fans on your show say, wow, getting Pierre-Luc Dubois even for those 3 years was worth it. Good for those fans if they think that. I couldn't agree, or I couldn't disagree more with what they have to say, but I think Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to take it on the chin, and at some point you just got to move it for the best that you can do and say you win some, you lose some. This is when they lost.
Yeah, the egg timer got turned around a little earlier, and the sand is coming down to the end. I really do think that that's going to be when we're seeing what happens down in Nashville in a couple of weeks. We're going to look forward to seeing you there and hanging out. It should be a very, very interesting week. Rennie, thank you so much for doing this in advance. Have a happy Father's Day coming up this weekend. And we'll look forward to chatting again real soon. And of course, should be a wild couple weeks around this club when we get down to Music City in a couple weeks.
You bet. Looking forward to seeing you there, Huss. Thanks so much for having me on, bud.
Thanks for doing this. There it is, Sean Reynolds. Give him a follow on Twitter. And, of course, if you're not already subscribed to the Kenny and Rennie channel, you know where to find that on YouTube. Big thanks to Sean for kicking off the program today with a great segment with Remo away for today. All right. I see the hot dog, the tailgating conversations are already in. Alex has a why not question of the day up in the chat for our friends at Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray. And it's the hot dog versus Smokey battle right now. Vote accordingly. Smokey seemingly with a big lead. Cannot be too surprised about that. All right, Mike McIntyre's coming up. But speaking of that draft in Nashville, we're going to get a little draft talk coming up with Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News in just a minute. But hey, with Father's Day coming up, Dad always likes to look good, right? Well, Modern Man wants to spoil the dapper dads this Father's Day. Modern Man Barbershops, of course, now have 8 locations in Winnipeg. And from now until June 19th, purchase a $40 gift card and they'll load it as $50. And plus, visit them on Instagram at Modern Man Barbershops for a chance to win a year's supply of Dapper Dan hair products for Dad. Modern Man has a variety of grooming services, including haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more, and a great selection of men's hair care and beard products. Book your look and make an appointment online at modernmanbarber.com. And as I said, follow them on Instagram and get in that contest at Modern Man Barbershops. Well, this glorious summer continues, and a lot of people are looking for a pool to jump in. Well, listen, folks, why don't you make 2023 the year you take the plunge? And visit aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. The Aquatech team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And whole home renovations start with Aquatech as well. With thousands of rentals as their foundation, let them upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech is ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options at aqua-tech.ca. I know a lot of you were out in the water last weekend. It'll be the same thing coming up this week. But folks, for everyone that enjoys their time on the water, you got to make sure your boat is ready to go. And that's why Manitoba Battery, celebrating their 10-year anniversary, is having their boat battery blowout sale coming up into June 17th. Listen to some of these great deals on batteries for your boat. 10-inch, 140-minute reserve capacity deep cycle battery for $105, or a higher quality AGM version of the same 10-inch battery that usually sells for $219 is on for only $139.50. Or you can get on board with the hot new lithium technology and get a 100 amp hour lithium battery that only weighs 22 pounds for just $599, which is $200 in savings. Any way you slice it, shop local, get the best prices in town, and it doesn't get much more convenient than Manitoba Battery because they'll deliver your purchase for free anywhere in the city of Winnipeg. It's that simple, gang. Give them a buzz. Pop by and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue, or find out more on the battery blowout sale up until June 17th at manitobabattery.com. I'm already ready for the weekend. We had such a great time at IG Field last week at the Bomber game. I know there's a lot of people enjoying those Canadian Club and ginger ales. I think it might be time to hit the Manitoba liquor marts or maybe your beer vendor because they're available there as well in time for this weekend. I'm so excited about the U.S. Open in California in prime time. And, of course, we've got Bombers Riders on Friday night. What a way to start it off. And, hey, when you get to the weekend, you want the great taste of Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey and the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Winnipeg Sports Talk Canadian Club. And, of course, at beer vendors, as I mentioned, the Canadian Club and Ginger Ale is ready for summer and available at your local beer vendor as well. All right, Mike McIntyre coming up in a few minutes. But first up, let's get ready for our trip down to the NHL Draft. Of course, we're going to be there. Winnipeg Sports Talk in Nashville at the Draft, presented by Coolbet, begins on the 26th of June. And to get ready for the trip down to Nashville and the picks in the first round, let's welcome in Tony Ferrari from the Hockey News. Tony, what's going on? How are you?
Not too much. Prepping for the final days before the draft and ready to get going.
Yeah, like, for guys in your line of work, is everything pretty much done? What happens over these last couple weeks? Is there any movers and shakers at this point with no more hockey to be played?
At this point, you're kind of just doing due diligence. You're checking in on guys that other friends and colleagues in the industry are like, oh, no, you're too low on this guy. Maybe you should check this guy out a little bit more, and you're doing that stuff. But for the most part, it's media and doing these interviews because no one wants to talk to us in October, November, December. So we got to take advantage of it in June.
The draft combine just happened recently in Buffalo. Does that at all come into play at all when it comes to rankings, or is that more for individual teams to sort of see the guys they like and really get between their ears more than anything?
I think it's mostly just getting to know the guys. I think the NHL Draft Combine is very unlike the NFL Draft Combine. It's not this spectacle. It's not the show. We have the VO2 max thing that everyone loves to talk about, but we don't have the 40-yard dash. We don't have the broad jump and all these things that are televised like the NFL Draft does it. So it's a lot of interviews. It's a lot of talking to guys, getting to know them on a personal level, face-to-face for a lot of teams. And at the end of the day, there's no on-ice training. There's no on-ice drills, and hockey is a game played purely on ice. So it's hard to really get a gauge too much for the physical attributes of these guys.
All right, I think most people agree the draft kind of starts at 2, but let's get to the obligatory Connor Bedard question. You've been doing this for a while. You've seen a lot of prospects. I mean, how historic a prospect is Connor Bedard in this draft?
He's pretty good, I'd say. I think player. He's got the tools. No, this kid's unreal. He's so fun to watch. He's got so much offensive firepower in his game. He really is kind of the next guy after McDavid, right? Everyone looks back at Austin Matthews and different guys like that, and no one's quite been on that same level as Connor Bedard up until now. It's so fun to watch a guy like this play. And the beauty of this draft class is, like you said, the draft starts at 2. The guys at 2, 3, and even 4, they're all guys that could go first overall in a lot of years. Outside of that draft with Austin Matthews in 2016 and maybe Jack Hughes in 2019, you're looking at guys like Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, and Matvei Michkov that's enough to go first overall in basically any of the other drafts.
Well, let's talk about that group, below Bedard. You've got Fantilli at number 2. I think he's the consensus number 2 pick. But how tight is it between Fantilli and the others for that number 2 spot? And how many players are in that next tier, if you will, below Connor Bedard?
For me, the next tier is 3 guys. I think you have Fantilli, who, in my opinion, is the clear-cut number 2. And then you have Carlson and Michkov, who you can debate at 3 and 4. I think with Michkov, there are some deficiencies in his game that are going to need to be ironed out. And Carlson's the safer pick. He's the center. He's a bigger guy. A lot of teams are going to be drawn to that. But just the game-breaking ability that Michkov has is unlike anybody else in this draft, even on the level of Bedard. He doesn't have the same kind of qualities outside of that Bedard does. He's got a very good shot, but defensive game, and Bedard isn't a defensive wizard by any means, but Michkov's defensive game is an area of concern, is away from the puck game, and you can get concerned about these little things. And sometimes the shot selection. I think early in the year, when he was with SKA, he was doing a lot of goofy junior-type stuff. When he got moved to Sochi, he really started to play in that system, and that's where you saw him take a step this year, which was really nice to see because you didn't see that at the start of the year. With Carlson, he's just such a complete center, a really solid playmaker that has power in his game. A lot of people have kind of gone on his case because he's not the most physical player at that size, but the physicality that he brings is when he has the puck on his stick. You're not knocking him off the puck. You're not getting the puck away from him. He's going to be able to put you on his back and kind of put his shoulder down, get to the net, and do those things. He's not a guy that's going to throw huge hits, and that's where you get to Adam Fantilli. I think Fantilli is a guy that will throw that big hit. It has that power in his game, has a bit of a better shot. He's got just about everything you'd want. Like I said, I think with Adam Fantilli, you're looking at a guy that, and if Connor Bedard wasn't in his draft year, you're probably going first overall basically any of the last 7-8 years.
You mentioned Michkov, and obviously there's concern because he signed in the KHL until the end of 2026. If he was from Moose Jaw instead of Moscow, how differently would he be viewed by NHL execs going into this draft, do you think?
This is an interesting question because I've gotten it a few times, and for me, I've never really been shy to rank Russians. I've never been shy to rank European guys. I've always been pretty high on them. So for me, he's probably still in that same range. I think when we see him at the draft and he falls to 7 or 8, and that's where he gets drafted, That's where you're going to get this question, and you're going to go, if he was from Moose Jaw, does he go 3 or 4? And I think probably. I think at the end of the day, the big thing with Michkov, the contract is there, but a lot of times a player takes 2 years to really get to the NHL and be their full self, and at least kind of get to be that contributing factor. Michkov, you're going to have to wait 1 extra year, but with the talent that Michkov has, I think it's almost worth waiting that 1 extra year. This kid's an absolute stud offensively. He's going to be able to step into your lineup on day 1 and be one of your better offensive players. So for me, it doesn't affect things a whole lot because generally speaking, from 4 to 10, 3 to 10, you're waiting 2 years for that guy anyways. I'll wait the extra year for a guy like Matvei Michkov.
Tony, you've got Will Smith at 5. I've seen him as high as 3 on a number of draft boards, and you've got one of his teammates from the U.S. national team at 6, and Oliver Moore. Specifically to Smith, how quality a prospect is he? And then is there a gap, a significant gap between he and Moore at that number 6 spot?
With Smith, he's just such a outstanding toolsy player. There's so many things that you watch his game and you're like, he can do anything. Sometimes he chooses not to. I think his interest in playing defensive hockey isn't quite there. So going to a system that's going to be coached by a Mike Babcock or someone like that, maybe not the best for his development in terms of the upside of the player that he is. But the sheer puck skill, the wow factor, the playmaking ability, this is a guy that is able to slip through holes, slip through cracks, and beat defenders with his hands, his speed, his skating. He kind of – you have questions about his transition game and whether or not he can be a true center that can carry the puck up the ice. But in the offensive zone, he's one of the most dangerous players in this draft class. I think he's an exceptional talent. And then when you go to Oliver Moore, he's kind of the opposite. He's got all of the speed in the world. He's an outstanding skater, the best skater in this draft, in my opinion. But he doesn't have that elite skill level. And I think with Oliver Moore, you're getting a more surefire center. You're getting a more surefire NHLer even. But the upside's a little bit limited. You're getting a guy that's akin to a Dylan Larkin. With Will Smith, the upside's seemingly limitless because when he's doing the things that he can do, this kid can be outstanding. You're getting a Trevor Zegras type player, a guy that has all the flash and skill and the ability, a real difference maker at the NHL level. And that's not saying a guy like Dylan Larkin isn't. I think really it's just two sides of the same coin. Do you want the translatable center, or do you want a guy that may end up on the wing?
Tony Ferrari with us from the Hockey News as we get ready for the draft in Nashville. We'll be there beginning on June 26th and broadcasting live throughout the entire week, presented by CoolBet. Our guy Zach Benson from the Winnipeg Ice finds himself at 7 on your list. I've seen a number of rankings that have Zach from 6 or 7 all the way down to the early teens. Fill us in on your thoughts on Zach and why he gets the maybe benefit of the doubt towards other players in that next tier.
Well, for me, the thing I value most is intelligence, and there may not be a smarter player in this entire draft class than Zach Benson. He understands how to play the game 3-4 steps ahead. I think the most elite players in the NHL, you look at even a guy in this draft class, like Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli, they have a plan A, then they have a plan B and C. A guy like Zach Benson has plan D, E, and F already in his back pocket as well, and I think that's the big differentiating factor for him. He's just so intelligent. I think the skating may be an issue, especially at that size, but he's still shifty enough. He's still good on his edges. He still understands how to get around the ice. And I think the skill is there. I think a lot of people question the skill a little bit towards the end of the season. But this is a guy that was driving play and being the real offensive catalyst on a Winnipeg Ice team that had Connor Geekie, that had Matthew Dubois, that had all these really high-end players. So it's not like he's a guy that's riding shotgun with talented guys. He's the guy driving the bus for those talented guys.
Tony, we've been talking about all these incredibly talented forwards. We haven't heard about a defenseman yet. How would you categorize the quality of defense as opposed to forwards in this? And where is the first defenseman on your board?
The first defenseman on my board is actually Stanley Cup at the 8th spot. I think the defensive group this year is good, not great. And I think you're not getting a top pair, a surefire top pair guy in this draft class. I think you look at him, you look at David Reinbacher, Dmitry Simashev, Tom Willander. It really is just a pick 'em of what style of defenseman do you want? Do you want the high-octane offensive guy? You can get a guy like Stanley Pelika. Do you want the pure defensive guy that will be able to kind of be physical and punch a guy and push him around and be that bully in the defensive zone? You got David Reinbacher. Do you want a guy that has all of the tools that you could want in a defenseman that could possibly be that high-end upside guy that could be a number 2 guy, you can go on off the board a little bit and draft Dmitry Simashev. Tom Willander fills that role as well. It really is just kind of what style of defenseman do you want? Are you really willing to pass over some of the forwards that are left? And if you are, then you kind of got your choice of defenseman there.
You know, and we've talked about all this elite talent that's available, you know, in the top 10. How deep is the draft? And what sort of player do you think would be available to a team like the Winnipeg Jets when they're on the clock at 18?
It's a deep draft. It really is. I think a lot of people have been focusing on the top end of this draft. I think a lot of people have been going, it's getting overhyped because of the Bedards, the Fantillis, the Michkovs. But in reality, if a guy like Oliver Moore falls down the board, if a guy like Zach Benson falls down the board, you're getting really high-end quality talent. I think Braden Yeager's cool players that are going to be NHLers. And you may not have a ton of stars drafted at the end of the first round, a ton of guys that are going to be like surefire top-line players. But there's a lot of quality talent in this draft class that at the end of the day could be very good NHLers. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if this draft is similar to the 2015 draft where you have those 4 or 5 guys at the top of the draft that are very high-end NHLers. You have a couple franchise-changing talents at the top in McDavid and Eichel, and then you get Marners. You get guys like that down the list. I think it's going to be a fun draft. At 18, there's going to be Tom Willander. There's going to be a David Reinbacher or an Axel Sandin Blakea there if you want a defenseman. If you want a forward, there's going to be the different guys like, is Gabe Perreault going to fall that far, or is someone going to snatch him up? Isn't Oliver Moore going to fall that far? I know his kind of draft stock has been all over the board as well. So there's a lot of talent at that 18 spot that if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, I just go, let's wait to see who falls to us and snag whichever high-end guy is there.
Tony, one of the other players that is of local interest is Nate Danielson of the Brandon Wheat Kings, and I've seen him ranked mid-first round, lower first round. I think you've got him at 30th overall. Fill us in on what Danielson brings to the table for a potential NHL suitor.
Well, he's a really interesting player because he has a lot of tools. He's got a good shot. He's a very good transition player, and in the middle of the ice, I have no worries about his game. My question comes, what are you doing defensively? Because he's a very good first-effort defensive player and then gets lost in the shuffle. He's a very good first-effort offensive player. He can attack off the rush, and then he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And I think that's the biggest question I have in his game. Is he going to be able to develop that ability to kind of come up with a plan B, come up with a plan C? We talked about Zach Benson being a guy that plans 6-7 steps down the road. Nate Danielson's a guy that goes, I have this plan. I'm going to go ahead with this plan. If that plan doesn't work, I don't know what to do next. And the tools are there. He's got a very good shot. He's a creative playmaker when that's the first plan. But the question is, can he develop that second, third plan? And that a lot of times that just takes maturity. So it could be an interesting pick for Winnipeg at 18 because he's right in that range, right from about 16, 17, 18 to the end of the first round and even into the early second round. That's where you're going to get a lot of these guys that have one or two questions about their game, but they're still very good players.
Well, and that is really, I think the most interesting thing about the draft, when you get into that mid-first round, when, there's differing opinions and you do see some guys that maybe rise or picked higher than the consensus has them out there. I know you've probably looked at a bunch of other scouts' list. Is there a player or two that you're maybe higher on than most others?
I think the one guy I'd say I'm higher on than most others is either Dmitry Simashev or Gavin Brindley. And I'll start with Gavin Brindley because I touched on Simashev a little bit earlier. But Brindley he's an undersized forward that plays on the wing, can't play center, but I think he excels on the wing. He's just one of the most tenacious, feisty guys in the draft class. I think he has the offensive skill, and it was showing up all the time early in the season. The process was there. He was doing all the right things. It was just he wasn't kind of getting that production. He was kind of playing second fiddle on that Michigan team to Adam Fantilli. And coming into the year, he wasn't expected to really play second fiddle. He was expected to be the third or fourth option, fifth option. But then when Frank Nazar went down, they went, we need you to do a little bit more. He adjusted to that role slowly over the year, went to the World Juniors, had a really good World Juniors, I thought, played an excellent depth role for the American team there. And then when he came back, he was one of the most productive players in college hockey. Not quite keeping pace with Adam Fantilli, but he wasn't far behind. I think his offensive game is going to be well developed. I think he's going to take a couple years in college. But that defensive game, the tenacity, the forechecking, he does so many other things away from the puck well that so many other players still have to figure out at this age. Gavin Brindley is a really, really high-end player that I think could be drafted anywhere in that 10 to 25 range and be a very valuable pick. Be shocking to some going that high, though. I think the other guy is Dmitry Simashev, the Russian defenseman who didn't quite produce all that much over in Russia, played in the KHL a lot this season. But the big thing with him is every time I watched him, I went, he should have had 3 points tonight. He should have had 4 points tonight. And there were so many chances he would generate. He's such a good, all the tools in the world. The big defenseman who plays physically. Defensive game is really well refined. I think that area of the game isn't going to be a question. So it's going to be about, can he find that production eventually? He didn't play in a system that really dictated offensive production this year. So when he gets a little bit more opportunity, when he gets on the power play over the next couple of years over in Russia, then maybe you see that offensive side come out. But worst case, you're getting one of the better defensive defensemen in this draft that's a really capable puck mover from his own end.
Tony Ferrari's with us from the Hockey News. You can check out his top 100 rankings and analysis on the top 50 at the Hockey News. It's fun. We focus so much on this first round, but there's a lot more that goes into the draft than just the first 32 picks. How would you categorize the depth into day 2 of this draft? And how many NHL players do you think, we'll see coming out of that second round and third round?
I think it's always interesting because in the deepest of drafts, 20 to 25 of the first round picks at least play a few games in the NHL. 15 first round picks play 200 plus. I think you generally get that in most drafts. Then you start getting anywhere between 5 and 15 that kind of go from second, third, fourth, fifth round that end up playing the NHL, and a few sprinkled in at the end of the last couple rounds. I think this year I won't be shocked if there's 15 guys from the second round that make the NHL, at least capacity. There's a lot of really high-end talent outside of the first round this year. A lot of guys that can play bit roles. I think you look at a guy like David Edstrom, if he falls to the second round, you can get a quality bottom six center there. I think you look at different guys over in Europe, there's a lot of talent, especially the Swedish kids this year. I think it's a fun draft. I think there's a lot of depth. Luca Pinelli, if he gets drafted out of the OHL, but that's a really high-end depth forward that can kind of be a tenacious, a guy that gets on the puck, takes pucks away from guys, throws hits that you go, oh, a 5'9" guy just threw that, a 5'10" guy just threw that hit, because he's not afraid to go into the corners, not afraid to establish body position and do a lot of things like that. So there's a lot of guys in this draft that I think are going to come out of the second, third rounds, especially, that are going to be solid NHLers and at least be solid prospects going forward that end up being a good trade chip later on down the road.
Tony, this has been a lot of fun. I cannot wait to get down to Nashville. Hopefully we'll bump into you there. Enjoy these last couple of weeks, putting the final touches on the mocks and everything that you'll be doing, and we'll look forward to more of your coverage on the draft in the Hockey News. Thanks so much for jumping by Winnipeg Sports Talk today.
Anytime, guys.
All right, great stuff with Tony Ferrari. We'll have more draft segments heading into 2 weeks from now. The Winnipeg Sports Talk live from Nashville. The NHL Draft begins on the 26th, presented by our friends at CoolBet. All right, Mike McIntyre is on deck. Do want to thank Vita Health for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Gang, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too, you got to get on down to one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores. Hey, Vita, the barbecue season's in full swing. Vita Health will have you available to stock up on some delicious grass-fed bison and beef steaks. And guys, with Father's Day around the corner, men's health is top of mind. Garden of Life has created some unique formulas like Prostate Protect and Once Daily Men's. Both contain 50 billion beneficial bacteria to support men's gastrointestinal health. Hey, and don't forget, if you can't make it down to one of the 7 Vita Health locations, you can shop online at myvita.ca for pickup or local delivery. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. Our friends at Wallace & Wallace are busy right now in the summer as Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialists. They've been serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter's done a number on your old one, give them a buzz. They've got vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if it's time to replace your garage door, Wallace & Wallace has Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors to fit your home. Give them a buzz at 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them online at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. Guys, how's the closet looking? Because summer is here and wedding season is here. If you need to up your menswear game heading into the next couple months, you got to get on down to F Apparel at 190 Smith Street. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. In a wedding party, talk to the F team about a 15% discount when the wedding parties get their suits from F. And if you do have a 2023 high school grad, pop on down to F Apparel, get a new suit for the young man, and F will throw in a free custom shirt and tie. F Apparel, ready for you. 190 Smith Street, downtown. Make an appointment or find out more online at F. That's EPHapparel.com. And just before we bring in Mike, another gorgeous day today here in Winnipeg. Always a great time to get down to one of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs for a blizzard run, the favorite ice cream treat of summer. Blizzard season's always better when it's at Nick and Nicky DQ in July. They got 4 locations: DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and the DQ out in Niverville. And if you do need a custom-made ice cream cake or blizzard cake, you can always hit them up and order online through their Instagram feed at DQ Manitoba. All right, let's get back to some of the big local stories right now with our pal Mike McIntyre. Mike, what's going on? How are you?
I'm thinking of Dairy Queen ice cream cake. Our family actually enjoyed one this weekend. We had a family birthday function, and the best part of the Dairy Queen ice cream cake, Huss, is the chocolatey nougat center. They should just sell that as a standalone treat. I bet sales would go through the roof.
You can probably get that in a blizzard, to be perfectly honest.
Probably.
Well, we'll talk to Nick. We'll talk to Nick and see if we can make something like that happen. Hey, listen, I know we're going to get into the Jets and probably spend most of our time focusing on that with everything going on, but I don't want to overlook the Bombers. Big win, a great crowd, perfect night. We've talked a lot about the long wait to get back on the field after the disappointment in the Grey Cup. The unfinished business tour started in an absolutely crazy game. I mean, I was talking to some of the Bombers last night at the Sea Bears game, and I said that was the closest shit kicking I've seen of a team in a long time. I mean, it was just bizarre what happened in the second half, and obviously there's some things that need to get cleaned up. But overall, that to me looked like a team that is ready to be a problem for the other 8 teams in the league, and very much is deserving of being the team to beat right now in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, I was among the 30,000 plus, I guess if you include the folks up in the press box who was there on Friday night. And I mean, let's start with the offense, which of course doesn't have Kenny Lawler right now. That's a big weapon that's not in the lineup. And, they still put up 42 points. And how about that first quarter? My goodness, Zach Collaros, connecting with 3 different receivers. That, to me, that was a message to the rest of the league that the Bombers mean business. And any, I guess, lingering hangover from that painful Grey Cup loss last year, if anything, Huss, you get the sense that the Bombers feel like they have something to prove again. And, with the talent they have and the track record they have, that's a pretty dangerous combination. The Bombers' offense was just tremendous. And I know the final score will say, well, the defense struggled, but no, I mean, those were obviously turnovers that led to some points being put up late. I thought the defense was pretty smothering. Bo Levi Mitchell didn't have a whole lot of room, time, and space out there, and kind of made him look fairly ordinary in his debut. So add it all up, it was a great night. And as you say, the score flattered the visitors. That was not nearly as close of a game. And, I think the Bombers have all the tools in the world here to be, again, very much in the conversation at the end of the year. Curious to see how they look this week in Regina against a Riders team that's coming off a win. And Huss, I'm actually getting an up-close view. I'm coming off the bench to go to Regina this week to cover the game for the Freep.
Nice.
Jeff and Taylor are both otherwise occupied for us. So the third stringer is coming in hot. I'm hitting the road Thursday morning, driving to Regina, and I'll be there to cover it on Friday night for the Free Press. So yeah, I don't cover a whole lot of Bomber road games. other than the playoff and Grey Cup variety. But looking forward to this. We'll see what kind of atmosphere is at Mosaic. I heard they had a lot of empty seats still, which is surprising. We'll see if that week 1 victory by Saskatchewan maybe moves some tickets. But it's always fun when these two rivals hook up, and looking forward to being there.
Jeez, Taylor and Jeff, week 2 of the season, already booking the weekend off. Interesting. I don't know how they got that pass past Jay Bell, but they got a good guy filling in for them.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, Huss. And I guess they're pacing themselves. I believe, I don't want to speak for them. I believe I know Jeff's off to the Michener Awards on behalf of the Free Press. I was
joking, of course, when I'm just blowing it off.
I think I want to say Taylor's got a wedding. So I think that it's good reasons. I don't think neither of them are putting their feet up at the cottage this weekend. And hey, I'm sitting around waiting for the Jets to do something. I don't mind a little football distraction. Of course, maybe all hell will break loose on the road to Regina later this week. In which case, I might be having to pull double duty. Which again, I don't mind that either.
Hey, little Bomber Rider action in week 2 of the season. Bring it on. Looking forward to that one. And, both teams 1-0 coming off opening wins. That should be a great one to get the weekend going on Friday night. Just before we get to those Jets, were you at the Hoops game last night? Have you been out to see the Seabears yet?
I have not. Both games have actually, now you're going to rip me like you just did Jeff and Taylor. I'm a bad local. I've had some stuff on. Family commitments. It's a busy time of year in the McIntyre household. The youngest daughter, she's about to graduate from high school. Just had band concerts and convocation coming up and all that. So yeah, I will get out very soon because I've seen obviously the videos and heard all about the atmosphere. It just sounds like they've created just a wonderful environment at Canada Life. A lot of excitement around the team, and obviously it didn't turn out so well last night in terms of the final result. But looking forward to seeing some hoops action up close and personal here very soon.
Hey, shout out to Mike Clausen. Welcome to the WST team. Thanks for becoming a supporter in the chat, Mike. We need more mics. The world you can never have too many mics, Us. Just on that game last night, I was really interested to see. I mean, we knew there was a lot of excitement for that first game. They did a great job of promoting it. The place was sold out. It was so much fun, great atmosphere, and the team won their opening game. I was very interested to see how things would look coming back. It's still a very new team. It was a Monday night game. They sold them all again last night. Now, a little bit of a smaller configuration. I think instead of about 6,500, it was about 5,400. But it was the Filipino night there. There was tons of people from that community there. And yes, the game as itself, I'm not sure whether they were due after kind of getting hot on the road. But it was Brick City, man. They could not make shots. And, to the credit of Edmonton, they were really hot shooting. And that happens right now. But 4-2, a great start. But I think what's most important is just the way the team has been received here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba. And, of course, on a night where a Canadian and Jamal Murray won the NBA championship with the Denver Nuggets, it is very clear that the grassroots of basketball have really grown in this country, and I think the future is very, very bright for the Winnipeg Seabears. All right, let's get to the Jets. Rennie was on earlier, and we were sort of talking about the different players that are somewhat on the block. Let's focus in on Dubois. And by the way, my RIP, my mentions. I went on the Tony Marinaro Sick podcast last night in Montreal. And it was a great conversation. I love Tony. I mean, he is a true radio personality with opinions and takes, and he can be polarizing, but it was a really fun conversation. But they posted it up. And I mean, you know how nuts Habs fans are. I mean, I, of course, was tagged in this thing, and my mentions, it's just half French, half English. Interestingly enough, I would say the majority of fans are out on paying Dubois over $8 million on a long-term deal. as well as the cost it would take to get him. But
Right.
really, Mike, what I think has been the most interesting development over the last week since we spoke was the athletic reports from Arpon Basu that the Winnipeg Jet, Paterson is going to try and broker this. They want an 8-year extension as part of a sign and trade with Winnipeg, and they're going to be giving a list of 5 to 6 teams. I mean, my first response to that from a Jets perspective was awesome, because you'd far rather to have 5 or 6 options than one option. And of course, the concept of a sign and trade, I think, would certainly, maybe move forward what the return the Winnipeg Jets could get. How significant is that, do you think? And how different maybe is the situation for the Jets when it comes to trading Dubois today, as opposed to maybe what most people thought a week or two ago, that it was Montreal and Montreal only that he would be willing to sign an extension with?
Well, I'll say this, Huss, assuming that report is true, and I have no question the report is factual. I must say I am a little skeptical about whether the Dubois camp is being completely upfront on that note. Color me skeptical that they really do have 5 or 6 teams that they'd be open to signing long-term with. But let's assume for a moment that the Dubois camp is being truthful, and they really do. That's seismic for the Winnipeg Jets. There's that word that we hear around this team, just like the seismic addition Kevin Cheveldayoff said of Rick Bowness last year. But this would be seismic, and you just outlined some of the reasons that it creates. Number one, the potential for a bidding war, and instead of one team like Montreal, which would be in complete control and have the Jets pinned against a wall, really. I mean, basically, whatever Montreal says they'd be willing to pay, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and that's your only option, that's it's take it or leave it. And the leave it would mean that you lose Dubois in a year for nothing. And then there's the whole offer sheet, mischief that the Canadians could really hem the Jets in if they wanted to just.
Well, there is one other option. There is one other option. I mean, I firmly expect that. Outside of a deal happening beforehand, Mike, I mean, if the cup is given out tonight, I believe there's 48 hours for teams to file for team elected arbitration. I think that's an automatic the Jets do. It takes out the possibility of an offer sheet, because if the offer sheet came and you're either talking about a first and third in 2024, or you're not really going to see reap any of that till 2026, 2027. But the other thing is that you would still be able to trade him at the deadline, and Brisson absolutely knows that. And to avoid coming back again, and listen, I don't think it would be good for either party to have him here, knowing that he's not going to be here long term, and finding the right spot to trade him through the time. But that is the one option that the Winnipeg Jets have if they don't see something they'd like. Because I will tell you this, it might deep six a lot of the vibes around the team next season in the first half of the year. But think about what a player like Pierre-Luc Dubois, think about what the prices that were paid for players at the trade deadline last year. And again, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying that this is a possibility, that the value for Pierre-Luc Dubois, I don't think goes down at the deadline, based on teams that could fit him in and how many teams that would at least want him for a Stanley Cup run. But back to your point, I mean, that now is the time to make things happen, I think, in the best interest of everyone involved.
And so if he's truly genuine, that there are those teams out there that he, outside Montreal, and again, we're not talking about just as a 1-year stopgap before he goes to Montreal. If he's actually talking about 8 years, whether it's New York, Los Angeles, Minnesota, which certainly boggles the mind that that's one place that was thrown out. I'm not sure why Pierre-Luc Dubois. I also don't think Minnesota, with their cap situation, I mean, they'd have to do all kinds of surgery just to make Pierre-Luc Dubois fit. I must say I'm very intrigued, and Elliot Friedman, I know, reported on this yesterday. LA is a team that absolutely would make some sense. For one thing, they've got a lot of really, good young players in the system that I suspect the Jets would be very interested in a potential return. They also have a need. Anze Kopitar, he might be done in a year, and he's been their guy, obviously, up the middle forever. And, I suspect they're looking at a transition to kind of the next wave. And a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois would probably check off that box in a number of ways, plays the kind of, heavy, big hockey that we know the Kings like. And I suspect Pierre-Luc Dubois would be very open to the Los Angeles / California life.
I could see him. I could see him signing a sign and trade to go to the Kings.
Yeah, me too. Here's the thing, Huss. I don't know about you. I still don't totally understand, and I know it's out there that he has his heart set on Montreal. I keep going back to the question of why. Why would Pierre-Luc Dubois want that spotlight? Everything we've come to know about Pierre-Luc Dubois during his, 2.5 years here in Winnipeg, he's an extremely sensitive and at times very emotional player. We saw him, many times the last 2 years wearing his heart on his sleeve, both when he would maybe be struggling and certainly when the team would be struggling. I'll say this, if Pierre-Luc Dubois goes to Montreal as, the hometown guy on a huge ticket, the media attention and spotlight that kind of came on him and the team in Winnipeg, that's going to be nothing compared to what he will experience in Montreal. And I personally wonder how he would handle that additional pressure and why he would want that additional pressure. And so I know there's obviously the connections that people keep making, and I don't totally understand. And so maybe there is some truth to the idea that he's open to other places. And going back to your original question, that would be tremendous for the Jets. If you could start pitting offers against other offers. And at the end of the day, obviously you still need Dubois to ink the contract extension to make it happen. But if he's truly being genuine, there is the potential there. And it's a game changer for sure from the boxed in position that I think we all thought the Jets were in when it was Montreal or bust.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up. The question as to why Dubois would want to go to Montreal, and whatever, that's his prerogative and that's in between his ears. But you also asked the question in a recent column, the Jets needing to kind of look inward to see why Dubois wants out. To me, the Dubois and Hellebuck are very different situations than the Scheifele and Wheeler. And listen, they put a lot on the line. Kevin Cheveldayoff in particular, what they traded to get Pierre-Luc Dubois to get him here. I believe the thought was because they thought that they had a chance of keeping him here. Maybe expand a little bit on what you wrote in the Free Press on what positives can come out of this, how the team might be better off with a little bit of introspection.
Yeah, I just think when you look at the scenario presented, we assume would be presented to Pierre-Luc Dubois here. He's coming off his best offensive season last year, points-wise. I think was 1 goal short of his career high in goals. Obviously was entrusted with bigger and bigger roles here. We know Rick Bowness repeatedly sung the praises of Pierre-Luc Dubois. So we assume that the coaching staff really loved the player. He's a guy who additionally was taking on more of a leadership role on and off the ice, and especially off the ice, the way he would step up. I have to assume that if he were to sign in Winnipeg long-term, that would be cemented in a more official way. Money is likely not going to be an object here. I know lots of people like to paint the Jets as cheap. They're anything but, Huss. The Jets have been a salary cap ceiling team. I know this past season they weren't quite at the ceiling, but they were close. But they've spent to the cap for years now, and so they're not going to get outbid. This isn't an issue of Pierre-Luc Dubois just chasing the money. The money would be here in Winnipeg. The role, especially if Mark Scheifele is moved, there's a number 1 center role just waiting. There's a bunch of exciting young players still on this team, from Connor and Ehlers, young wingers that a center would love to play with. His family lives here. His dad's an assistant with the Manitoba Moose. to me, it's a question I keep coming back to is why is Winnipeg not a fit? And when you hear a team like Minnesota thrown out there as a potential landing spot, it's like, well, what do they have that
I
the
still
Winnipeg
don't know if I
doesn't
buy
have?
that for the record. Like it's just that was such a weird team,
I think that was a
especially
Jeff
in their
Merrick
makeup.
report. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, he was. He said that he had heard that, and you want to talk about sticking it to Winnipeg. I mean, that would be the closest thing to a real rival, and I would say almost a bitter rival, considering the way the season series went and ended last year.
Absolutely. So, is that a negotiating tactic again from his camp that they threw a team like that out to kind of maybe put some additional pressure on the Jets? I don't know. All I'm saying is if you're the Jets, Pierre-Luc Dubois is the kind of player that I think you want to invest in and you want to build around. And if he doesn't feel like this environment is for him, I think the Jets would be wise to then find out why. And again, I know some people will say, well, it's all about the player. This is what Pierre-Luc Dubois does. I think in junior, he demanded a trade. We know what happened in Columbus. So people will say this is the Pierre-Luc Dubois way. It's all about the player, nothing to do with the organization. And maybe there's some truth to that. But again, I think Winnipeg and the organization and the city and everything should be a place that Pierre-Luc Dubois would feel like establishing some long-term roots. And if he doesn't, I think you got to get to the bottom of why. Is it an issue about the room? And we've spent a lot of time talking about the culture in the room. Does Pierre-Luc Dubois, has he seen and heard things that has him wanting to check out of here at first instant? Is it about management and ownership, a long-term vision? And again, I don't know the answers to that. I can certainly speculate, but I think to just sort of dismiss this, and some people are like, well, good riddance then to Pierre-Luc Dubois. I don't think it should be that simple. I'd be trying to find out what was it that didn't work with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and are there things as an organization that we need to do to ensure this doesn't happen again? Because as you say, Huss, we're not talking about a fourth line grinder here. We're talking about a guy that they traded a franchise player in Patrick Laine for with the idea that he'd be here long-term. 2.5 years later, he seemingly wants out at his first chance. And I think it's worth digging deeper into the why of that.
Yeah, I will say this. I mean, from talking to many players, both on the air, off the air, I don't think, there's certainly nothing to do with the way the players are treated here. I mean, this organization bends over backwards to make sure that these guys have everything that they could possibly want and are treated first class all the way. I mean, I guess we'll never really know whether it's a personal thing with some individuals. I mean, I guess that's possible. Or it could just be that is Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Right.
And I mean, I know you're high on Dubois. And I mean, I know Ken always thought that he would be signing a long-term extension. I'll tell you what. Listen, obviously, you know where I'm coming from on this. I hope the Jets get the best possible deal for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and it helps the team going forward. I do think that there is a little bit of buyer beware on anyone that signs up for 8 years at $8+ million for Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Well, and so to add to what we were just talking about, if I'm a team that is looking to acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois, and highs and lows and all these swings that come with being in professional sports, because you're right. I mean, there's probably going to be some, a situation where some people start to wonder about the player himself, and his reputation maybe starts to precede himself. So I'd be curious what kind of fact finding is going on behind the scenes of any potential suitors to find out what didn't work in Winnipeg.
Well, I mean, listen, I'll just say this. I think he's an enigma. He is a player that at his best can be completely dominant and take over games. And at other times is invisible, is not engaged. Playoffs. And I mean, he has nowhere near the level of consistency that you would need, that, in my opinion, that you would need from your leader and number one center going forward. And I know there were some people, sign him and make him the captain. I mean, listen, we don't really need to talk about that because it's not happening. But I And I really got that in my conversations with people in Montreal. I mean, as much as they love the storyline of a guy coming home, it's like, wait a second, what are we getting here? What do we have to give up for them? And what sort of an investment will that be? All that being said, you can think he's a flake. You can think that he shows up some nights and shows up some other nights. It only takes one team to see the Pierre-Luc Dubois we saw in game number 1 against the Vegas Golden Knights completely take over a game and dominate a team that is one win away from winning the Stanley Cup and feel that they've got the need to do it. I just hope those same people don't watch the tape of game 5 because, Mike, I mean, it's the most incredible example of a player, how you can look like one of the truly elite players, game changers in a game, and then a week later in a game that you would think would be everything left out on the ice because, you're hitting the golf course if you don't win, an absolute no-show. And we all know that Rick Bowness was talking. He might have been talking about a few other guys, but Pierre-Luc Dubois was at the top of the list when Mount Bonus erupted post-game 5 at T-Mobile Arena.
Oh, no question. And again, a lot of that is because we've seen the really good Pierre-Luc Dubois and the way he can drag his teammates into the battle. And we saw none of that. Now, were there some injury issues? I've certainly heard after the fact that maybe Pierre-Luc Dubois was a little more banged up than anyone was letting on. So is that a potential explanation / excuse? Maybe. But certainly the passion and the emotion. I mean, we were watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're seeing guys nowhere near 100%. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's playing with one arm basically, and guys still look like they're engaged. They may not, they may not have the ability to do the things you expect, but even when you're injured, you can at least look invested. And we saw a guy in that game 5 that looked a lot like the guy that kind of checked out on the Columbus Blue Jackets. I don't think that's truly who Pierre-Luc Dubois is. And is that just a maturity thing that he still has some maturing to do? I'm willing to suggest that it probably is. But for sure, buyer beware. If you're going to invest up to $9 million a year, which as we sit here today, Huss, that's more than 10% of your entire 23-man roster salary cap. And if you're going to pour 8 years into that and give up substantial assets, you better be sure you're getting what you think you're getting, and not getting a guy that might just disappear on you. So it's another wrinkle for sure. And the other thing is, Huss, that we don't maybe talk about. We always talk about potential with Pierre-Luc Dubois because of all the tools he has. This still is a guy, though, whose career high is 28 goals. His career high is 63 points. So it's not like he's an established point-a-game player like a Mark Scheifele for years. He has yet to be a point-a-game player. Is there the potential there for him to be a lot more? Absolutely. And he's still young enough that you assume his best years are still ahead of him. But again, we're not talking about a 40-goal, 80, 90-point guy. He's never put those numbers up. How much does that affect the ultimate cost to acquire him, and what his salary ends up looking like? I guess time will tell.
Well, and bringing this back to the Kings, and I will just throw this little possibility out there because Connor Hellebuck's on the market, and we've heard that they're very much interested in a goaltender.
Package him up.
Could you possibly see literally like a massive deal? I mean, the guy that I've been hoping that the Winnipeg Jets could get, or this type of a player, and I've been talking about it for a couple months, is Quinton Byfield. And it was really interesting to hear what Elliot Friedman had to say about what their interest in taking a big run at Byfield would mean. And again, he's only had 3 goals last year in 53 games, but I mean, a very young player, 20 years old, looking to make that step up. It would be, what would the return for Dubois and Hellebuck be in a package? Wouldn't that be something? Listen, Mike, great stuff as always. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to your reporting when the Bombers take on the Riders coming up this Friday. Have a great trip to Regina.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Huss. You bet. Take care.
Good stuff. All right, we are going to head down to Southern California and talk with our pal Mark Zecchino, who had that epic call of Nick Taylor's historic putt for Canada. Just before we bring in Z, don't forget Bombers back in action next Thursday at IG Field. Make sure to get out early. The Princess Auto tailgate zone opens 2 hours before the game. Of course, Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Our friends at Consolidated Supply are real busy right now. The leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, and golf carts, both new and used, is the exclusive car dealer and club car dealer in Manitoba. Also, other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. And of course, they're the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Pop by and see them at their showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. Hey, you might be waiting on that new Jet jersey to see where the dust settles after these next few weeks. But everyone knows that Manitoba's #1 sports superstore is Royal Sports. Jets gear, tons of new Bomber gear in time for the season. And not to mention spring stock arriving daily with soccer, baseball, softball, tennis equipment, tons of disc golf, and a huge selection of bikes. Royal Sports is at 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And just before we bring in Z, I'm already ready for Friday. You got to get out to a Boston Pizza or your favorite sports bar. None better than BP, though, because we're going to have Bombers Riders and we're going to have prime time major championship golf from LACC. You'll get those ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, and gourmet pizzas, and the latest from the BP feature menu. If you're staying in, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, there's only one way to bring in Mark Zecchino for this segment. He's always been one of our favorites, and he's so great to us. But, Alex, as we bring in Z, can we please play Mark's call of one of the great moments in Canadian golf and sports history from Sunday at Oakdale in Toronto? This is how it sounded on PGA Tour radio.
That's where the eyes are looking. Swing of the putter. Comes up with some speed. Now up the rise. For the eagle. For the win. To the cup. Take it. Yes! 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 The drought is over! The drought is over! Nick Taylor with the eagle, the 2023 RBC Canadian Open champion. History, history. 500 FedEx Cup points. 2-year exemption. He's an icon now in this country.
Oh, does it get any better than that? Mark Zecchino joins us kindly from LA, where they'll tee off at the U.S. Open. Z-Man, thanks so much for doing this. And I mean, you may have to call a lot of golf for a long time to match that moment on Sunday in Toronto.
Yeah, until today, I'm taking my last breath, and it's never going to get better than that. I mean, what a moment. All I did there in that call, to be bluntly honest with you, is just turn into the world's biggest fan. That's how everyone around that green on that property felt that day and at that moment. Absolutely incredible. And it was a privilege to be a part of it, really. I've talked to Nick since. Bob Weeks and I, with Graham Dillette, we've been on property now for about 5 hours here, maybe 6 hours at LA Country Club. We've got people walking up to us like we won the national championship, congratulating us. I got people asking me about the call and all the, I guess, my 15 minutes of fame, for lack of a better term, because it's that call's kind of gone everywhere. Well, it's been quite a treat, and Canadians are still celebrating it down here, which is really cool.
Well, I can tell you people are celebrating in our chat right now. This is the first time. Chill, Z-Man, awesome call. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And, you know, Z, for a week that started in such a bizarre way and dark, I think, for many golf fans and certainly the players, what a storybook ending to, ending such a long drought. Listen, you've been a mainstay in Canadian golf for a long time. I mean, can you try to if someone didn't know, what's the significance of what happened off that putter of Nick Taylor, and what does that do for Canadian golf in a year where we now have 4 PGA Tour winners?
Yeah, so I think there's some weird historical things aligning here, and it never occurred to me at the time. At the time, it was just pure joy and celebration. But I've done 900 interviews in 24 hours, and I've had some time to talk it out with people and kind of reflect a little. And if we go back 20 years from now, 20 years back, we get to Mike Weir's win at 3 at Augusta National, a major championship that a Canadian male has ever won. And 20 years later, you got all those Canadians competing on Sunday. We had 21 Canadians in the field. We've got every week on the PGA Tour, quite often we have 6, 7, 8 red and white flags in the tournament, 4 or 5 in contention. And you really point back to 20 years ago, Mike Weir, as to that's what led to this. And I'm wondering, and my hunch is that I'm probably accurate in this. If we go 20 years from now, in the year 2043, my guess is we'll be looking back to that Sunday that Nick Taylor had with the same level of significance as what we did in 2003. And it will likely spur on another golf bump for youth in this country. It's already on fire. And I think it's going to do a lot for kids and just investment in the game. And I think it's one of those moments. And just as a sports fan, guys, how many of those moments have we had this century, even last century, occurred on Canadian soil? I mean, they're rare. We get them. They happen once in a while, but they don't happen too often actually soil. And I think so special.
It was. I mean, the playoff, the drama, everything around it. Tommy having the opportunity to birdie on 18, not getting it done. And then it came down to the 4th playoff hole, back at 18 for the 3rd time. Z, I mean, you've been covering golf for a long time. You're a mainstay on PGA Tour radio. You're at all these tournaments. How unique was that scene on 18 at Oakdale on Sunday as opposed to pretty much all the other tournaments? And we'll even include majors. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to 2 Ryder Cups. I mean, that looked and felt like a Ryder Cup environment.
Well, I think 100% to have 20,000 people kind of wrapped around the green that way. Look at the TV numbers. TV numbers came out in the U.S. and everybody, Canadians north of the border always think that, Canadian Open, no one cares but Canadians, or it's an off week for the PGA Tour. It's not a designated event, yada, yada. That's all BS. There was nearly 7 million people tuning in on Sunday south of the border, one of the highest Sunday TV ratings we've had this year on the PGA Tour, especially in a non-major. It was tremendous, and you're right. The atmosphere was like being at center ice, almost at a Stanley Cup final. It felt like, because you're completely surrounded, and people were lining the fairways from the tee right to the green. I had 300 or 400. Inside the ropes, media, Canadian golf dignitaries, like the who's who of the Canadian golf community, basically ready to charge the green behind me. I'm down in the catcher's position because I got to be in the the front of the line to make this call, but I know what's coming behind me if this thing, but no one's thinking it's going in. I kind of alluded to, teased a little in the phone call that, he knows what it does in the last 18 feet because he had that 18-footer earlier in the playoff. So if he could just figure out what the first 50 feet do, you never know. But we're all hoping for a 2-putt. We're not hoping for, but as it got closer, you can almost hear it in my voice. As it gets closer, all of a sudden there's this belief, like, this isn't going to happen, is it? Like, I could almost see it with about 15 feet left. You can hear it in voice. And I mean, the loudest pop I've ever heard was, it was the biggest pop. And we all exploded. I charged Nick. Everybody charged Nick. We're all hugging Nick. Poor Adam Hadwin. That was about 15 feet away from me. I mean, like, whoa. That's the best spear I've seen since Bill Goldberg in '98. So.
Oh, man, it was, I mean, it's a moment that we will honestly never forget. And I imagine it's probably nice that you're getting inundated with people talking about what happened Sunday with Nick Taylor's victory, because I imagine Z-Man down there in LA, a lot of the talk is about the news at the beginning of last week when it comes to the PIF, Live Golf, and the PGA Tour. If you can, give us what have you seen? What have you heard so far? How much of that story is the topic of conversation down in LA?
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing as last week, where in the beginning of the week, it always dominates the conversation until the golf gets going. Not as much as last week, because obviously last week the news was hot and it broke. I think the narrative is kind of right now is that we're all left with more questions than answers, and we all feel that way. We all feel like we're probably not going to know anything till the fall. We got to see what the PGA Tour schedule looks like. That's going to tell us a lot. We're months away from that. Brooks Koepka was cheeky with the media, pretending like he knew what was going on. He doesn't. He's just playing it up to his character out here. John Rahm was much more transparent pre-tournament comments about John Rahm feeling like confused. Some guys feel betrayed and whatnot. A little bit more, I would say, with John Rahm's comments. But a lot of the conversation this week is really about this venue. This is a real treat and a very different U.S. I don't believe I have ever, even including Aaron Hills, I have never seen a U.S. Open venue like this before. Extremely undulating, lots of creativity, lots of shaved areas around the green. Not your typical U.S. Open rough. We're dealing with like Bermuda grass, very wiry, spongy grass, not that thick U.S. kind of long bladed rough that you see up in the upper Northeast like we saw in Rochester for the PGA. This golf course has got a lot of risk reward, lots of creativity around the greens. This is going to be an extremely different U.S. Open. And that's a lot of the talk with the players. I talked to Corey Connors. I talked to Adam Hadwin today. I talked to Taylor Penrith today. I talked to Justin Rose today. And they're all talking very differently about how they're going to approach this golf course and how they would normally approach a U.S. Open.
So fill us in. I mean, it's fascinating. I've been doing some research, getting ready to make some picks and place a few sprinkles down on the board. Z-Man, considering the unique nature of this course, is there a type of player that you think may have a bit of an advantage as opposed to what we normally believe is the type of guy that can survive a U.S. Open?
Yeah, I think driving is going to be the most important function of this championship, especially compared to other U.S. Opens, because of the forgiveness off the tee. Now, as the golf course gets firmed up, these fairways are certainly going to shrink a little. They're going to get smaller when the ground gets harder because there's a lot of camber kicking balls in the wrong direction. That being said, though, for a U.S. Open setup, it's fairly forgiving off the tee. So it becomes two factors: a second shot golf course, irons dialed in. And part two of that is if you don't have the irons dialed in, who has a creativity around the greens? I think short game wizards are going to do well here. There's so many shaved down low areas. It's not just thick, rough, hack it out around the green like you see at a typical U.S. Open. It's more a U.S. Open like you saw back at Pinehurst. You need several shots around the green. You got to be comfortable with flop shots off tight lies. And if you're not comfortable with flop shots off tight lies, you got to be comfortable with putting it on the ground, hitting bump shots, trying hybrids around the green surfaces, putter. So creativity, the ability to make really good decisions under pressure inside 50 yards is going to be very valuable this week. So I expect when we look at Sunday, I expect to see a lot of bombers there because they got freedom. But I look at the guys and I go, okay, who's got their irons dialed in and who is really good around it? I hate to say this, guys, because, he's 53 years old and he's trying to get a career Grand Slam, and Phil's star has certainly fallen quite a bit. But I thought the door on Phil's U.S. Open chances were firmly closed. But looking at this golf course and seeing the creativity that you need around the greens, I think a Jordan Spieth, a Phil Mickelson might be able to surprise some people around here. I really do.
Another guy that kind of comes to mind when you make that up is Cam Smith. I mean, Cam Smith, sometimes his driver gets him, gets a little leaky, but I'm not sure. I mean, I was having a conversation with Dustin Nielsen today on the Lock Shop. I mean, if we were just placing a ball in the fairway and saying you can have anyone else get it to the green and into the hole, I think once the drive is done, you could make an argument that Cam Smith is as good as anybody in the world at that.
Yeah, very much. That is the weak spot. He should do well. I'll give you another reason why you should like Cam Smith right now. I don't know how to rank them, but arguably the 4 best players in the world off tight lies in no particular order: Cam Smith, Phil Mickelson, Scotty Scheffler, and Jordan Spieth. They can hit any shot they want off any type of grass, as tight of the cut it is, regardless of what the grain's doing, down grain, into them, etc. That's why those guys feel so comfortable around Augusta National, because Augusta National asks you to hit that shot tee to green all the time. You never get that cushy, fluffy lie, and you never get that lie out of the rough at Augusta. You are always dealing with a scenario of a tight lie and the grain working against you. You're going to get a lot of that here at LA Country Club, and those 4 players are by far the best in the world off tight lies. And I think Cam's on everybody's radar this week. Everybody's talking about Koepka. There's no reason why Koepka can't win. We know how he gets up for these majors. But I think Koepka's greatest tool is that big power fade off the tee and his driver. When you look at the courses Koepka's won on, with the exception of Erin Hills, you look at where we were at Oak Hill and Rochester and Oakmont or Bethpage, I should say, and all the places that Brooks Koepka has won, his driver is weapon. And I'm not sure that plays into him here. I don't think, his ability to hit it long with a power fade in the fairway all day long under pressure is going to be as big of a tool here as it would be at most U.S. Opens.
You mentioned Scotty Scheffler. We got to quickly mention him because he's the clear betting favorite for this event. And, we were looking at some numbers, Mark, and it doesn't even seem like this is possible, but he is so far ahead of everybody else from tee to green. I mean, if he just sank a couple more putts, he might have won 3 or 4 of his last 5 or 6 tournaments. The difference between first and second in tee to green is the same as second to 20th right now. Are we overthinking this, or is Scotty Scheffler just poised to go and raise another trophy in a major?
Yes, it's coming. It could come this week, and it could come multiple times throughout the summer. If he putts at 0.00, which basically means playing in a 100-person field, if he's 70th in putting out of 140 at 0.00, and he had done that the last 2 weeks, he not only would have won the golf tournaments, he would have won by 5 his last 2 starts if he just didn't give away a shot to the field in putting or gain a shot to the field in putting. In fact, if you really take a closer look at these numbers, if he had been 100th in putting and given away only 4 shots to the field, he still would have won those golf tournaments by 1 shot. That speaks to how good he is tee to green, how far superior he is tee to green, but it also speaks to how bad he's putting right now. The good news is putting, as you guys know, it can come, it can go, you can get on streaks. Sooner or later, he's going to figure this out, and he's going to have a day where the hole opens up for him. And he's going to hit his lines, and he's going to have one of those putting days. When that day occurs, look out, because I think we're in for maybe a 60, 90-day run, where if he gets that run at the right time, for instance, this week, you could start ringing up multiple majors. We could, start racking up this Open, the next Open, maybe a playoff event or 2. He's just got to putt average. If he putts average, he's going to win most weeks, regardless of what anybody else is doing.
Mark Zecchino joining us live from LACC, where the U.S. Open tees off on Thursday. Z, of course, everyone's still talking about Nick Taylor's big win and all these great Canadians that are in the field. If you had to handicap the Canadians, who do you like to have the best chance of winning this tournament? And if I was wanting to get a few Canadian flags in my DraftKings lineup, which Canadians do you think are poised to, whether their form or how they're coming in or the setup with the course, have the best chance to be a factor, at least on the weekend?
Well, let's remove Nick, because Nick is just got to be emotionally spent.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, but certainly in form. I think Corey's got the best form, but I don't think this I just talked to Corey too. He's kind of looking at it, and he didn't use the word quirky, but that's the word that came to mind when he was talking about it. I don't think this is necessarily a Corey Connors golf course the way it was back in Rochester. I think that, and I don't know if Taylor Penrith and his power off the tee is that much of an advantage here, similar to the way I was talking about Brooks Koepka. I think this is more about a guy who can figure it out around the greens. I like them all. Listen, they're all great players, and none of this would surprise me. But if you're asking me for just one, I think it fits Mackenzie. I think it fits Mac a little bit better, Mac Hughes. And I think he's the guy that kind of likes this style of golf a little better. So just because of that, we'll go with Mackenzie. But I mean, they're all playing so well, and they all got momentum. And I got to think that most of them are going to take what they saw on Sunday and use that to give themselves that boost that they're probably all looking for. That has to be inspirational, what they just saw at Oakdale on Sunday.
No doubt about it. Mark Zecchino is our guest, Golf Talk Canada, PGA Tour Radio. Z-Man, thank you so much for doing this. Everyone is still, I'm going to have to play you out with the call again. Just on the way out, last one for you. This course, it's like in one of the richest area codes in the entire North America right now. You've got all these massive shacks around. Just give us a quick idea about where this course is, how close is it to where you guys are staying, and how different it is than, most of the normal venues for both PGA Tour events and major championships.
This is absolutely bizarre. One of the top 10 most exclusive clubs in all of America. I mean, Lionel Richie's home is on here. The old Playboy Mansion borders the patio, borders the property, excuse me. The old Spelling Mansion, Aaron Spelling's mansion, which sold for $180 million. I mean, unbelievable. The area is so rich here in Beverly Hills that they have two courses here, the North Course and the South Course. The North Course was the course that was renovated. That's the course we're playing the championship on. But they were offered $2 billion for the property that the South Course sits on, and they said no. That's how much money and prestige we're talking about here, where you could say no to $2 billion to give up the other 18, the one you don't normally use. So that kind of says it all right there.
Z, have an awesome weekend. We'll be pulling for the Canucks, and if we can have anything close to the magic we had at Oakdale, we'll be in for a treat. Thank you again, and have a great weekend.
Later, boys. You guys have a great one.
Good stuff. All right, by popular demand, we need the call again for all of you in the chat. If you popped in late, this was the Z-Man calling Nick Taylor's bomb for Eagle to win the RBC Canadian Open.
That's where the eyes are looking. Swing of the putter. Comes up with some speed. Now up the rise. For the Eagle. For the win. To the cup. Take it. Yes! 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 The drought is over. The drought is over. Nick Taylor with the Eagle. The 2023 RBC Canadian Open champion. History. History. 500 FedEx Cup points. 2-year exemption. He's an icon now in this country.
Oh my God, what a call from Mark Zecchino. And honestly, cannot thank Z enough for jumping on with us today. If you're listening on the podcast, he was right there by the practice area at LACC. And if you are a golf fan or a major championship fan, this is going to be fun because of West Coast. We've got late tee times. We've got primetime golf. And by the way, you still have time to get in our Winnipeg Sports Talk DraftKings contest. Go to your DraftKings, click on the WST League, and get in there. We've got a room for 100 people. Top 5 wins, $3 to enter. And our pal Eric Johnson from TaylorMade, I'm going to pop by and grab a few goodies. So we'll have a little extra prize for the top performer on the weekend. We'll see what we get. I'll kind of clarify that on Wednesday. But another good reason to play with us for the U.S. Open Championship. Send us a tweet at Hustlerama, at Sports Talk WPG, if you want to get in and you don't know how to do that. All right, we still have to take care of some business, and we will maybe take a look at those U.S. Open odds in a second. Got to thank our friends. And, we should have sent a beer over to Z-Man. I mean, his voice probably cracking a bit from that call and all the interviews he's been doing. But if he's around here, I'd give him a generic lager from Little Brown Jug, which is your basic lager, just better, light and clean to taste with a mellow flavor and crisp finish. Now Manitoba can support local without having to move away from the domestic taste they've come to expect with the light beer. You can pick it up at the tap room, and you can also grab it at Winnipeg Goldeyes games. Had a few generics. I know Dallas did as well at the game on the weekend. Goldeyes are going to be back a week today for their next homestand. Go to goldeyes.com for more information about all the events coming up. But when you get there, Little Brown Jug on at Craft Beer Corner, and of course the generic available as well. Goldeyes, by the way, start a new series tonight on the road, and we'll hook up with our pal Andrew Collier a little bit later on this week. And by the way, it's not just the ballpark right now. 1919 now available at IG Field as well at select locations. Big thanks to Little Brown Jug. And of course, to have the Z-Man on today to talk about that call, all of our golf reports, and there'll be a lot of it this week, brought to you by our friends at Breezy Bend Golf and Country Club, one of Manitoba's top private clubs with a championship course, top-notch practice facilities, and the best 19th hole around on their beautiful course side patio. Great men's, ladies, and junior programs. A perfect long-term home for you and your family. If you'd like more information about getting on the waiting list for the 2024 season, give our pal Corey Johnson a call over at Breezy Bend or find out more online at breezybend.ca. Locking down dates for our trip out to Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. For any of you that are thinking about a world-class fishing getaway where you can get on the water within 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the spot. And there really is nothing like the Aikens experience. As great as the fishing is, the world-class hospitality of the Terren family and the Aikens team is even better than the incredible fishing. Find out more at aikenslake.com or send Pitt a tweet at Aikens Lake or a DM to find out more about limited availability for this season or start planning a trip for the 2024 season. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines for today. And again, a huge thanks to Coolbet, our pal Pat Gregoire, for their support of WST. WST at the NHL Draft, presented by Coolbet, begins on Monday, June 22nd. All right, here we go for the for our lines for today. We've got a clinching game. The Cup is in the house tonight, and the Vegas Golden Knights are pretty big favorites, minus 182. The Panthers plus 154. Full disclosure, I'm fully going for the Panthers tonight to at least get this one to 6. A, we'll have another hockey game, which is always great. And B, with the Nuggets winning in 5 last night, we need this one to go 6 for anyone that rode with us on our Lock Shop partner parlay for this series. So fingers crossed the Panthers can find a way to stay alive and get that series back in. Total on the game is 6. And if you do like the Golden Knights to win by 2, plus 143 on that. And hey, if you think the Panthers can come back and win it, did the same thing they did against Boston. Well, they were 17-1 to come back against the Bruins. They're only 8-1 to come back against the Vegas Golden Knights. That is all there. And of course, it is U.S. Open week. Check out today's edition of the Lock Shop for more on all of our picks for the event. But Scotty Scheffler is the favorite as we talk with Z-Man at 7-1. John Rahm 11-1. Brooks Koepka 14-1. Rory McIlroy 16-1. And then Pat Cantlay and Vic Hovland at 18-1. Hometown hero Max Homa was 33-1 last night. That's gone down to 28 along with Jordan Spieth. And then that guy that I brought up that I think might very well be in the mix on Sunday, Cam Smith, 30-1. We got all the rest of our picks up at the Lock Shop and talk about it a little bit tomorrow on the Cool Bet lines. And as far as the Canadian Football League goes, Bombers 6-point favorites right now on the road in Saskatchewan for that Friday night game. But the CFL week gets going in Ottawa on Thursday as the Calgary Flames 5-point road favorites in Ottawa against the Red Blacks. Arbuckle will be starting one more time for Ottawa before Jeremiah Mazzoli is hopefully ready to get back in. Lions 7-point favorites against the Elks on Saturday, and Argos Ticats Sunday. Toronto 1-point favorites. All there at Coolbet. Use the promo code WST if you haven't played a Coolbet before for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your opening deposit. I guess I got to get to some horse picks too. Remo, I actually had a winning night last night. Shout out to Kim's Texas Bling that came through. And I guess we did have a scratch, so got returned one bet. So I actually was up a couple bucks last night, which was nice. Here are the picks for tonight. We're going to go to race number 2. I'm going with an exacta. Lucky Luke to win with either Aknos, which is number 3, or Really Slow. We always love Really Slow last year. Kind of hoping it'll be the Lucky Luke Really Slow show That is the first selection. Then in race number 4, we've got horse number 3 to win. That is Big Energy. 2 other selections, a couple triactors. So race number 5, we've got the 1-5-6 combination. So Royal Commando, Kentucky Jake, and Going Success. Any order will get a winner for that one on a $6 wager. And then we go to race 7, final race of the night. And what do we got here? 3, 6, 8. One for a little bit more of a long shot. Living Sky, Fingertip, and Misgiving. Of course, post time tonight is 7:30 p.m. I'm not sure if there's any availability in the dining room, but you can certainly see if there is, or make an appointment or reservation for a future date of live racing. And if you are staying at home, you could bet at hpibet.com. Make sure to check out the Assiniboia Downs YouTube channel, because Kirk and Stretch will be getting after it at 6:45 p.m. with everything you need to know about the card tonight, and far more educated picks than will ever come from myself or Michael Remus on the program. Great stuff with our friends at Assiniboia Downs. And there you see Remo just kicking it back today. Hit the gym a little bit. Maybe I'm not exactly too sure what he's doing. Anyways, it was a weird day to take off, a Tuesday in the middle of the week, but I hope he's having a great time. And we've been taken very good care of by our pal Alex here on Winnipeg Sports Talk today. And speaking of Alex, the Ottawa Senators back around his neighborhood now do have a new owner, which will be approved presumably. And sounded like that was pretty important for the Sens to get the ownership in place and then move forward, considering what a huge couple weeks it is for everyone around the National Hockey League. Pierre Dorion still in charge there. I would imagine that is the case going forward, but you never really know until everything has been confirmed. This has been a great show today. Big thanks to Rennie for jumping on early, because I didn't want to talk to myself for the first 20-25 minutes of the program. Always fun doing it with Remus, but great stuff from Rennie right off the bat. Tony Ferrari with some draft coverage as we get ready to head down to Nashville on those shows coming up in 2 weeks. And of course, Mike McIntyre, and what a treat it was to have Z-Man from LACC before the U.S. Open gets going on Thursday. Tomorrow on the program, we will certainly, I'm not sure whether Murat's back. Hopefully we'll get Murat back on the program. I know Billick will be jumping on this week. Rowicki, I believe, although he's got some big family things going on right now. We'll get Ken Wiebe a little later on. We've got some other big things planned, but more on the latest on the Winnipeg Jets, the latest on any of the trade information or possibilities. We'll hit that for you. We'll also talk some Bombers, looking ahead to Bombers Riders on the weekend. And we'll see if tomorrow we've got a Stanley Cup final, which might drive some of you crazy. But yeah, the Cup is in the building tonight, and the champagne's on ice for the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll break it all down tomorrow, whether this series is heading back to South Florida or whether the Cup is coming to Manitoba for a couple of weeks with all that Manitoban content on the Vegas Golden Knights. Huge thanks to Alex Allard for getting us from point A to point B in the end of the program. Great job. Just seamless having Alex roll in. Shout out to Remo. Hope you had a great day off. And thanks to all of our guests. Thanks to you for being with us. Hit that thumbs up for you YouTubers out there. Make sure you're subscribed, and tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk and how they can join us Monday to Friday live at 1 p.m. here, Central Time, here on our YouTube channel. And right after the show is up, the pod will be up in time for your drive home. Everyone, have a great one tonight. Enjoy the hockey game. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock right here on WST.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.